Hi, I'm Darren Buford, Director of Editorial, Design, and Digital Strategy for ABMP. Til Luchau is a lead instructor and the Director of AdvancedTrainings.com. With a diverse background that includes experience and contributions in fields like somatic psychology, structural integration, organizational and leadership development, and conflict resolution, Til's ability to connect interdisciplinary, big-picture ideas to practical real-world applications has made his trainings and events popular worldwide. His regular myofascial techniques column has appeared in Massage and Bodywork magazine since 2009, and his articles have been published in magazines and peer-reviewed technical journals in Australia, Canada, Poland, the UK, and the USA. In the next session, Til explores myofascial techniques for the deep posterior neck. He'll demonstrate several effective hands-on myofascial techniques for the cervical facet joints and related muscles. I hope you learn a lot from this presentation and continue to enjoy Til's column in the next Massage and Bodywork magazine.
This is exciting. I'm getting to teach a class in ABMP's new classroom here at the Genesee headquarters, and we're going to focus on the deep posterior neck. Now, that's never a bad idea. No matter who's coming in, no matter who I see, people can use neck work. And whether it's because we spend a lot of time on computers or texting or driving or watching too many of ABMP's classes, somehow the neck gets to the place where it needs some help. And there's a couple tendencies, and we're going to go through two of those, either into the spectrum, and look at some ways to understand what's going on, and then also some ways to work with it. So there are some supplemental materials that go with this little mini class. You can go to this link, advanced-trainings.com/ABMP16N, and there you can get the ebook mini manual, which has the slides I'm showing you, a sample chapter from the Advanced Myofascial Techniques book, some note organizer pages, some more techniques that I'm not going to have time to show today, all kinds of stuff you can do there. So just check that out. If you have questions along the way, since this is being recorded, we don't have, let's go back for a second, we don't have a way to answer the questions live. However, we do have a web forum where you're welcome to go ask your questions. I think, well, I'll put that website up at the end because it's not appearing on that slide. So we have a web forum where you can go ask questions and we can converse about things that come up along the way. Stop me anytime you guys have questions. We're lucky enough to have a live audience today. So anytime you wonder about things, it's probably the case that somebody else is going to wonder too. So tips for getting the most out of this kind of event. Because it's on a device, for most of you, it's easy to do other things. I suggest resisting. Just do this. Let yourself get distracted by these really bizarre images. This is the base of the neck. This is a spinning model from Primal Pictures showing us some of the structures we're going to be working with. But really give yourself to both the visuals and the concepts and the sound of this event and the physical part. We're actually going to do it. We're going to do some work and we're going to show you what that looks like. But then I suggest you could actually watch this with a colleague or friend, or you can go practice these things on a partner or a client. And then engage your mind. And that's the place where, again, making your notes in the note organizer if you downloaded it, or for yourself, things to remember for yourself, things to ask about later, things to look into more. It's a great way to stay engaged with this process as we go. And then here's that question link, facebook.com/groups/at.distance.learners. That's our online forum. It's a private group, but just request entrance, and if you say you're with ABMP, we'll let you in right away. And that's where you can ask questions or comment on what you're seeing there. Some of you will be doing this for continuing education credit, and just a little heads up on the questions you'll need to answer. In the nod test, the small nodding allows us to assess freedom at which joints. It's going to be multiple choice, but watch for that answer. What does the practitioner look for in the large movements of the nod test? This is a particular kind of movement we're looking for in that large version, and what is it going to be? And you'll have a choice later to pick Pick the type of movement. Number 3, where are the fingers placed in the posterior wedge technique? What's the placement? Because it's very specific. And there's a lot of variations that could be similar but not the same. So where are the fingers? Number 4, which muscles are engaged in the active version of the posterior wedge technique? I'm going to mention some in particular. Which ones do I mention? Number 5, what active movement is used for working with a hyper-erect, otherwise known as a military neck, for the posterior wedge technique? Yeah? I bet some of you have some ideas already. I see some smiles. Yep. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be referencing Advanced Myofascial Techniques, Volume 2. I'm going to walk us through a chapter, so if you have that book, you can actually follow along, either live or by recording. If you don't have it, that's fine. This is totally a standalone course where you'll get a lot of benefit just from watching what's on the screen, or you can actually go and get the ebook, and the ebook has the sample chapter we're going to go through in it. So this chapter, chapter 12, the deep posterior neck. Again, like I said, it's a common complaint with clients. Clients need neck work. There are ways to ease into the deeper structures we're going to work with today. Some of the other webinars I've taught for ABMP are great preparation for this, as well as other neck work you know. So for sure we would spend some time with superficial layers of the neck, overall rapport building and getting comfortable on the table, getting the context for the work, all those usual preparatory steps before we jump into this level of the deeper work in the neck. Because the deep neck, the structures in the neck are affected by all kinds of things, including a whiplash injury. For example, this little snapshot shows the head being thrown forward, which, if you think just in the simplest version, mechanically could strain the posterior compartment of the neck or strain the facet joints. There's lots of other things that could be happening too. These effects will go all the way down the back, say. It could be erector issues or thoracolumbar fascia effects of just this simple movement here. And a car accident, say, is never this simple either. There's usually lots of things going on. You're bracing because you see something coming. You're looking in your mirror because there's, you don't know what's happening. You get hit at an angle. You don't get hit straight behind. So there's all sorts of different things that could be part of an overall whiplash pattern. But this piece, the back of the neck, especially the deepest layers, can be a real key. Especially, and I'm going to probably repeat it later, especially after some time has passed. This isn't the work to go do when someone had a car accident on the way to your office, say, and they're showing up with an acute or recent whiplash injury. That's a whole different set of considerations, and we go into detail in that in another ABMP webinar, actually, about how to make the call about, are you going to work more fascially, more direct, or are you going to work in a more patient, indirect, neurologically based way, where you're thinking more about the effects of the trauma itself before you get into the tissue effects. But once it's time to get into the tissue effects, these techniques I'm going to show you today are really effective and really useful. And there's posture. Posture or alignment or position. Just looking at this makes me want to sit up. In fact, this is a picture from the Museum of Osteology in Oklahoma City. And I have this by my desk, this picture, because it's, kind of hurts to look at it. There's actually an interesting debate going on right now in our profession about the role that posture has in relationship to pain. Our conventional wisdom says we get the posture good, people feel better. And that seems to be true a lot of times, but when we sit down and try to look, does posture predict pain? Can't tell. There's sometimes that you can not have a relationship between the two. And it's worth following this debate as it unfolds and thinking about it for yourself. But the idea that posture is important for its own sake certainly has aesthetic arguments. It certainly looks better. I feel better when I look at someone who's not standing like that. But then there are also clear mechanical effects of being aligned. But the pain thing is more complex, and we're going to get into that some too. But this work we're doing today, for sure, we're going to work with the back of the neck. We're going to work with this posterior compartment. So we're focusing on this little segment. But if you look at this picture, it really is a big picture issue. You can't just get this guy's neck happy and expect his life to be a whole lot different if you don't work with more than just that one spot, of course. Next page in the book shows the nod test. And we'll actually go mock that up in a minute here. But just to briefly say something about the nod test, we watch people nod and we look at two movements. One is large, one is small. And in each case, we're looking at different things. In the small version of the nod test, where it's just about this much, we're looking to see, can the head move right up on top of the neck, something like a seesaw would move on its pivot point? Is most of the movement happening right there at the atlo-occipital juncture? Yeah, right there. There's my pointer. Right at that juncture. Is most of the movement happening there? In the small nod, that's what we're looking for. And I'll review this when we get to the real people too. This picture is from Eric Franklin. Thanks to Eric for allowing me to use this so many years. Great book he wrote. If it doesn't move up at the top, if there's movement throughout the neck when someone tries to nod in a small way, it's probably because the suboccipitals aren't lengthening. They're not able to eccentrically lengthen enough to allow that movement to be focused at the top of the neck. So in other words, these little suboccipitals that we're looking at here in the primal animations aren't free enough, or aren't elastic enough, or aren't relaxed enough to allow that movement to happen there at the suboccipital joints. AO. We're going to work right up underneath that occiput based on what we saw in the small nod test on some of these suboccipitals you see here. Now in the large movements of the nod test, so here's neutral, and this is my wife Loretta, by the way, and my neighbor David. So when they nod, when they drop their head, they have different patterns. When they nod forward, they have different flexion patterns in their neck. The back of Dave's neck lengthens, and he stays relatively vertical. Loretta's neck, in spite of her being the spouse of a body worker, doesn't lengthen as much. So when she looks down, actually she's getting a lot more movement at the base of her neck. And the angle of her neck actually inclines forward a little bit. So it's hard to tell in the static pictures. We'll look at it actually some video. Static assessment only goes so far. But that's what we're looking for in the large nodding. Large nodding looks at the question, can the back of the neck lengthen? Can the back of the neck lengthen? Dave shows one version of what it looks like to lengthen. Loretta shows one version of what it looks like not to lengthen so much. So this is in your mini manual. It's the nod test, page B2. Or sorry, page 3.1. Sorry, 3.1. We've got a couple page numbering systems going down there. It's page 3.1 in your mini manual, or if you're in the neck class, it's actually B2. And so then we work. We go in and we have people do active movement while we feel for what the soft tissues of the posterior compartment do. Are they able to lengthen in flexion? And we're both going to work muscle and fascia and ligament and everything along that whole continuum of the myofascial system. Because we want to feel for length, like I said, the ability to lengthen, the ability for those things to get longer, the extensors to get longer when the flexors flex. Here's our region. We're focusing again on the soft tissue in the posterior neck, the green structures in this picture. Those are the ones that need to lengthen when we flex. And this picture shows the muscles in the color. Those are the muscles that are green. But we're thinking myofascia, meaning it includes these, but it's also their wrappings, and also the things between them, and also the envelopes that wrap them all into a larger bundle. And then it's also that central nuchal ligament. All those things, and then the wrappings around the whole neck. All those things are part of the structural, connective tissue structural part of component of the neck that we're going to work with these techniques. After we assess and put someone on the table, we're going to do the transverso spinalis technique. The transverso spinalis technique is a passive movement where I'm passively lifting your head and essentially dragging the myofascia past my knuckles. Yeah. And I'll show you how to set that up so it's comfortable for you. It's a very efficient way to do that. You don't have to strain, you don't have to work real hard, and it's comfortable for the client too. This same technique, you can just vary the position, vary the angle a little bit, and work with nuchal ligament elasticity too. This is in the studio when we're making the shots for the book, and there I am looking for the right position of the hand. So just getting a slightly different position for your hand so your hand can be comfortable, but also you can work with that central nuchal ligament is another way to apply this technique. And then by lifting the head into some passive flexion, it lengthens the myofascial structures in the back of the neck, including the nuchal ligament, which is this large sagittal structure that limits flexion. On a quadruped, this is a hugely important structure. It keeps the head from falling forward from a horizontal neck. But on our bipeds, we've come vertical, and if it does the thing it does, which is restrain flexion, it can actually be part of this lordosis of the neck problem. So as we work down through the soft tissues of the neck, we get the deeper and deeper layers. They become more available to us, including these small structures between the vertebrae. Right here, it's the facet joint capsules that are colored green here. So we'll get down to that level too, where we can actually work with the facet joints, because they, not only do they restrict motion when they're not elastic, but they can be a source of pain and trouble for people. So let me get my pointer going again. So right here, right at these joints, these facet joints, which is the place where one vertebrae meets the one below it, we want to feel for a little bit of opening and closing when someone nods their head. So we'll actually put someone on the table and have them do some nodding, and we'll feel with our fingers, do these places open and do these close. The soft tissue that might influence that, I mentioned, some of the larger structures, but also the smaller, deeper ligaments right around the spine, right around the cervical spine, including the nuchal ligament, but also the ligamentum flavum, the posterior longitudinal ligament, the joint capsules around the facet joints, etc. Anterior longitudinal ligament for extension, any of these structures and more. This is just showing the bigger, more obvious named ones. In a dissection, we would just see a lot of tissue around this bone, and it's any of those things that could influence the movement. So here's where I'm feeling, in this technique, I'm actually feeling for the facet joint space. It's my hands either side of the spinous process, rather. Feeling for the facet joint space, and I'm asking for some gentle, active movement. And I'm checking for her ability to open at each level. My hands are comfortable. This is in your mini manual on page 4. But I am feeling right up in these joints for their ability to open and close. Now we're ready for that next one. Why do we have a brain made up of hands in this slideshow? Because why?
Proprioception?
Yeah, proprioception or sensation, just registering. Yeah, part of what we're working with is tissue, all these things we've been seeing pictures of, but a big part of what we're working with is proprioception, or one's own perception of movement, including interoception, kinesthesia, just the ways we feel what happens in our own body. And that's actually going to make perhaps more of a lasting difference than any tissue work we do. No matter how detailed and how precise we are with the tissue work, if we don't shift someone's felt sense of their body, chances are they're going to go right back to whatever they're doing before. And the tissue will readapt. So actually a big part of what we're after here is giving someone a new felt sense of their body, of their neck in this case, so they naturally make different choices and do different things, make different movements. And the neck isn't very big in the brain. This is a model of how much of the brain is dedicated to the different body parts in terms of sensation. How much of the sensory homunculus is proportionally dedicated to different parts of the body. We have a lot dedicated to our hands, and that's what we're going to use for the work. So there's a lot of your brain in this. But look, he doesn't even have a neck. He's hardly got a neck. Proportionally, there's very little of the sensory homunculus is dedicated to any of the back and neck and spine compared to, say, the face, hands. Yeah. Okay, so next page. This is showing us how it's not just about lengthening either. In other words, balance, flexion, extension up at the top of the neck isn't just about being able to lengthen the back. It's also about being able to shorten the front. So we want some muscles to relax and lengthen, but we also want other muscles, particularly the prevertebral muscles, to participate or be part of the movement as well. So the general tendency is for the structures in the back to be too tight. We'll come back to this one in a second. Structures in the back to be too tight or too short, and the structures in the front to be too long or too inaccessible or too weak, in the conditioning language. So they tend to be hyper used in the back and underused in the front. That's probably 9 out of 10 people. I'm just making that up. I don't know the statistics, but most people that's the case. There are people where it's the opposite. But most of us could use more length in the back and more participation of the structures right along the front side of our vertebrae. Because it's really, as that back opens up, as the space opens up between the vertebrae and flexion, it is the rectus capitis, longus coli, rectus capitis anterior, all these guys in the front, longus coli, longus capitis, that need to be part of bringing that head forward, bringing the neck into flexion. If they're not participating, the neck, it's hard for it to get out of that flexed position, and because these are overpowering the longus coli in front. So in that, we're not going to get in there and say try to rub the longus coli today. There are ways to work it directly, carefully, but that's not what we're doing. We're going to use the movement cues and the facilitation to really help someone find the ability to use their own longus coli, longus capitis. Because it shortens when the back lengthens and vice versa. This zone along the front side of the spine, the prevertebral zone, is really important for a lot of reasons. One of them is in neck injuries, the actual nerves that are, by the way, are embedded in fascia. The nerves that are embedded in fascia can become injured and cause all sorts of issues that related to sympathetic nervous system activation. So people will have headaches, vertigo, nausea. This is a mechanical explanation for a lot of the sequelae or symptoms that are seen after whiplash injuries. Carrying on, flexion and extension. So here we see a neck that maybe could flex a little more. Again, it's hard to tell in these static pictures, but you can see there's some areas in there that don't really flex so much. The spaces between these aren't as big as the spaces elsewhere. Some of that's normal. There is some variation of normal movement between the vertebrae, but with this person, I'll bet we're going to help them feel more mobile and freer if we can elicit or facilitate some movement in these facet joints in particular. And then an extension, this person is getting a lot of extension in those joints we just mentioned. However, there's others that don't seem to extend as much at all. Yeah, that stay in a relatively flexed position. So by helping this person find extension in some places where they're not finding it now, they're going to, again, feel easier, and there's going to be less movement demanded of any particular joint. Just spreading out the pattern and helping people feel generally more stable. At the same time, they feel more mobile. So here's our extension. Here's the neck and extension, yeah. So you can turn this all around and do it the other way. You can look and see where does someone not extend. To tell you the truth, though, it's going to be easier to feel that in most people than it is to see it. And you do want to be cautious with asking people to extend too much, too, especially if they've had a whiplash or a neck injury, that can be uncomfortable or destabilizing for them to do too much. Okay, a few more pictures and we'll go to the table to try these things. So here's extension. Here's the tissues lengthening and shortening and extension. Here's a neck that was advertised by a chiropractor as a military neck, in quotes. There's some controversy about that term. Some say perhaps it's a diagnosis that's thrown around too casually. But in any case, we can talk about it in terms of a neck that doesn't extend as much as it maybe could in places. So in this case, we would use our wedge technique and ask someone to actually close the space or pinch the fingers in each spot and use our words to direct that in each place. Okay, so to summarize the cervical wedge technique, we have some different indications. This is the kind of the star technique of the sequence. The indications include lack of neck motion with the large and small movements. This is on page 125 in your big book or in your ebook as well. Lack of head forward posture or cervical lordosis, just a resting position that seems to be in some extension already. Lack of flexion in the resting position. Flat or reversed cervical curves, meaning the opposite pattern, otherwise known as military neck. Immobility related to cold whiplash, cold being the later stages of a whiplash. Tension myofascial headaches will also respond really well to this particular technique, this kind of work, because sometimes those can be related to those occipital nerves that exit between the vertebrae and are wrapping through the myofascia of that deep posterior compartment of the neck. The purpose of this technique, again, just to give you a large context before we go try it, we're increasing mobility, participation, and proprioception of all the cervical joints in both flexion and extension. So we want them to move, we want someone to feel the movement, and we want them all to be moving. And we want to increase participation of those prevertebral muscles, the anterior neck muscles, particularly in flexion. We want someone to be able to use those too. It's part of that big picture. So now in the book, there's a whole study guide you can go through, or if the quiz that you're doing through the ABNP site has similar questions, although a little different. Word to the wise, they're different. But let's just check you on one of those. What active cervical movement is suggested for working with a hypererect or, quote, military neck in the posterior wedge technique? A, extension, B, flexion, C, rotation, D, side bending. Class, what's your vote? Someone said B. B, flexion. So someone has a neck that doesn't flex as easy, doesn't extend as easy. So it's already, its neutral is maybe a bit of flexion already. Yeah? We're going to have them do extension. We're going to ask them to actually do some active extension to close the places that don't close in that case. But yeah, this fools experts. So don't feel bad if it doesn't make sense yet. It makes a lot of sense once you're on the table and actually feel it. So in the nod test, which is what we use to assess neck flexion, neck extension, we're going to do small nodding and large nodding. I've already briefed our brave volunteers on the difference between the two. So let's see your small nodding. So we want just a little bit of nod and a little faster, Marjorie. Thank you. So that allows us to see freedom of motion up at the top of the neck. And if we take Sudeep, why don't you wave at us, Sudeep, if you don't mind? Give us, just want to know who you are, Sudeep. Keep going. Thank you. If we take Sudeep as an example of someone who has most of their movement up at the top, let's say, and then Tanya, would you wave at us, Tanya? Someone who has less movement at the top, say. So those are examples of the two ends of the continuum, say. In fact, Sudeep and Cassandra, why don't you switch places? Let's see if we can actually order you like a deck of cards. And then I'm going to let you pick your own suit. So we got a nod, yeah? Yeah, I think this is approximately the order of movement at the top of the neck. So from most movement at Sudeep's end, wave at us, Sudeep, so remember who you are, great, to least movement at the top at Tanya's end. Tanya, there you go. Great. So then take a break from that, get your breath. The next motion to check in the nod test is large nodding. So go ahead, if you would, and do a large nod, everybody. Great. So the large nod allows us to see, does the back of the neck lengthen? Does the soft tissue in the back of the neck lengthen? And everybody here is pretty much lengthening, but I think our ordering is very close to the amount of length. I'm just going to keep watching for a minute here. Thank you for being so patient, models, because this is really useful to see all the different variations and patterns that are possible. Okay, take a break, everybody but Marjorie and Tanya. Would you two just keep doing a large nod, because I want to focus in and see if I can describe. You are both great candidates for this work in terms of, I think we're going to get even more length in the back of your neck. And I would maybe switch your positions. So would you mind going to the front of the class, Marjorie? So in terms of degree, amount of movement. Yeah. So maybe we'll be able to get a little more movement from Marjorie. And now it's reversed, now that they've switched. So there's not a big difference. But just so that you can see the continual possibilities, we're trying to give you different variations here. So we've done our nod test. We saw with Marjorie that we wanted more length in the back. And you were also toward the front of the line in terms of the small nod test too. You had less movement up at the top as well. So we're going to, and did you feel any of that, by the way?
Yes, I did. I could feel where it felt really held up top, and then my whole neck was held, and then at the bottom it was moving. So it didn't feel like I needed.
You could feel those places, and we'll go through and review each of those now. So of course that nod test happens in a context after we've talked to our client and find out even why they're coming to us and what they're there for. But it's even more useful to link it back to someone's felt experience too, to find out which aspects of that they feel from the inside out. So yeah, face down, come to the place where you're comfortable, your head's hanging over the edge. Great, and I let you decide how much. We don't want your chin hitting something. Yeah, so you can come even more. Because the idea is for you to really hang off of there, as long as that's comfortable. Yep. Arms are on the table. You okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, so what that does is it puts the neck into some passive flexion, and then gives me an opportunity to work with the bigger picture a little bit, with a big broad tool here of a forearm, for example, to begin to warm up those layers, prepare them. I'm just sliding mostly on skin and what's right under the skin. Can you see okay over there? All right. Now, Marjorie, if you want, you can gently lift your head and lower it. Is that okay, the pressure? Yes. Now this position, that allows her to participate a little bit, but I should say this position isn't a good idea if someone has glaucoma or high blood pressure, that kind of thing. Those are, it's kind of contraindicated to have your head lower than your body. But for most people, they're okay here for 2 or 3 minutes. We don't want to leave you here too long. But yeah, she's doing that steady movement as I anchor the superficial fascia, some of the erectors and trapezius here that are part of the neck flexion story. And you can imagine how we could actually take this technique all the way down. Yeah? Pressure okay, Marjorie?
Yes.
And you can, yeah, you can play with turning the head a little bit. Rotation as it hangs.
So
yeah. Yep, go both ways. There you go. Or even like side bending, like bring your ear up to your shoulder. That way. So just looking for the places that connect into this area that I have a hold of now. Should all be comfortable. You doing okay, Marjorie? I'm checking in verbally since I can't see your face. If she's biting the sheet or something, I don't know it. Okay, that's the technique. I'd repeat that on both sides. Now, let's have you come onto your back. And we have page 3.3 in your mini manual, transversal spinalis technique. This is the one where we're focused on length. And I'll both show the camera and I'll show you guys too, but first the camera, where my hand's just on the table. And I'm using a knuckle. Some of us are used to using the knuckles. For others, this might be a new tool, but give it a try. It can be a very efficient and effective tool to do specific work without a lot of work on your part. The key is that I'm keeping my wrist straight. I'm not bending extending my wrist. My wrist is straight. I anchor into some superficial layers at first, and then I gently lift the head and neck into some flexion. How are we doing with that, Marjorie?
That's good.
We're warming things up. This is a preparation phase, so I'm thinking mostly just skin and the layers underneath it. And I can feel where those layers slide and where they don't slide so much. So the motion happens not by me sliding my hand down her neck, but by, me lifting her head gently into some passive flexion.
It looks like, at least from this position, you're anchoring closer to C7. Is that true, or?
Well, let's show you. Yeah, let's show you over
it.
here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm lifting into some flexion as my hand just stays on the table. Most of us are used to working with our active hand. So most of what people will do is try to do that, which might be interesting, but it's a different technique. This allows a bigger picture change. Allows more of the tissue to flow past that static knuckle. If someone's head is particularly heavy, you got a big head, or there's all those variations that you use to lift the head. And a lot of it's going to be my body position where I'm comfortable as well. But I work at different layers as it starts to, the elasticity starts to increase, that viscoelastic response in the tissue where it gets a little easier, and I naturally can work deeper, pass by pass. And that can be as thorough and detailed all through those structures of the back of the neck. If you remember in the images, there are a lot of different compartments in there, lots of different structures. All the way down as far as is comfortable, down the back too, into the upper erectors even. And I mentioned nuchal ligament, so that'll be gently right on the midline. And that you're going to get mostly with the top. So this isn't so much nuchal ligament. This is nuchal ligament. Flexion right up at the top. Yeah, a little bit of traction on the back of the head with the head on the table.
So are your knuckles on each side of the?
I'm right in the middle. I'm not like bouncing down the spinous processes, but I'm right in the midline into the ligamentous structure. Pressure okay?
Yes, it's really, I can feel each layer as you're going through. And it's always surprising how superficial it starts off.
Yeah.
And then you sink in.
And then we go deep as the layers open up. Any other questions about this one? Posterior wedge technique, or cervical wedge technique, also known as. So here's a chance for me to, I'm just going to get positioned. Here's a chance for me to reassess too. So if you want to nod for us, Marjorie. Yeah, and she's doing a small nod, which is great. If someone's lifting their head off the table, it's going to be a whole different pattern. So in that case, I would have cued her to leave her head on the table. She's already doing it. Now, interestingly enough, in spite of what we saw when you were standing, I feel quite a bit of opening here, right up at the top. What about you? makes a little click.
Yeah.
Little ligament clicking over something when I press on it. Is that uncomfortable at all?
No.
Okay. Yeah. So let's not get too caught up in the details. I started to really get into that spot, but let's get the big picture first. Go ahead and do that small nod again. So I'm feeling motion there. If I just feel the back of her neck, the areas I feel the least motion are kind of here, C3, C4 maybe, C4, C5 in that region, and then even lower perhaps. So those are the places I feel the least movement. So some of us, we can go right to those places where there's not much movement.
And I keep nodding.
Well, take a break for a second. More often, you got to start somewhere where there is some motion for someone to feel. Because if you start at the place that's not moving, then sometimes that's the hardest place to feel too. There's in that little picture of the guy with the brain, there's none of our brain that's mapped out for that part of our body when it's not moving. And so starting at a place where there is some movement, like go ahead and nod. Do you feel the opening there when you look down?
Mm-hmm.
So this is pretty clear. This joint here, and this is probably C2, C3, is opening pretty obviously when you look down. So now I'm going to go down one joint and see if you can find that motion here.
Oh, wow, I can really feel the difference.
It's different, huh?
Yeah, that was a great idea, going to the movement first.
Going to the one that moves first and then compare that to a place that doesn't move. So you're doing a great job of finding it too. She's doing very small, focused movements. Arnold would be proud. You're doing these reps with your mind in it for sure, where you're really getting super specific about the movement. Now, most of us aren't going to start that way. Everybody here in the audience is already a therapist of some sort, has some experience with your body. But most of our clients will probably start with a bigger motion, and the cues you can use in that case, show us a bigger motion, just, yeah, something like that. Well, so the cue I would give would be just leave your head on the table and use a super small motion to find this place right here. And then I'm kind of just chattering away here, but actually I'm her biofeedback machine. I'm giving her cues as to when she's moving and when she's not. So right there I feel the movement. And then I get agreement. Do you feel that too?
Yes, and it feels different one side compared to the other.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get you really straight. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So that changed it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still, I'm feeling less movement
Yes,
over there on the right.
my right side.
Yeah. So I would suggest, at least at first, work with people in a straight position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, straight flexion extension. You can do some really interesting work with rotations, but that's a whole different class.
I know it makes me want to side bend
Yeah,
or something.
yeah. Which isn't necessarily bad, except that by keeping you in the sagittal plane, we're integrating you as we go. We're balancing things out as we go, keeping things aligned as we go. So now I've moved down a joint, and she's looking for it without me even having to tell her. But if otherwise I'd be saying, okay, so now find this joint. In fact, and this is an important cue, let the movement start here. Oh, that changed everything.
Yeah.
And you don't have to work so hard. You can actually just move the back of your head towards me. That's all you got to do.
Okay.
There it is. It's just moving the back of your head towards me and letting this place open. Now, she's learning how to not tighten here, but she's also learning how to contract or activate the prevertebral structures. You have to contract along the front of the spine to open up these joints. That's what she's looking for in her explorations.
It's weak.
It's weak.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to find. It's hard to do. You can feel that. But it's changing as you do it too. It's getting clearer to my hands at least. How about you? Is that making more sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Who knew?
So a word about hand use. I'm just doing that for you guys. And then for the camera, I'm just using curled fingers with my hands on the table. I'm not straining or doing anything more than is comfortable for my hands.
Is there something the client can do to keep this work, like that they can do themselves, that you can teach them to keep this work in there, keep their mind specific to that spot that was weaker or less moving?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's finding it again in movement.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get to the end of our little sequence here, to sit up and find that again is the best possible homework. Because it's just changing the brain map is all we're needing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that, like you said, by repeating it.
Yeah.
So getting someone to feel that when we're sitting up, and then do it.
And
Do
have
it when
that-
you're driving, do it when you're texting,
Mhm.
do it when you're cooking dinner,
Yeah.
whatever. That's how you keep it.
Integration.
Yeah. So we did a couple of joints, but you get the idea. We're just going to work down through the various joints of the neck, and you can take some time with this. This one technique, you can see how you could spend 20 minutes, half an hour on this one technique and it wouldn't be too long. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I had someone do this with me. They were practicing to assist one of our classes, and she really took her time, and it changed my whole day to realize, oh, wow, I was not using those places as much as I could, and now I can feel them, and now I can use them. So it's a remarkable technique. And the other thing is we needed to do everything else to get here. This is a cool technique, but it's not the one to start with. You need to get the layers to lengthen enough around those deep facet joints to be able to find them and to use them in this way. So now we're moving into our integration phase. The nuchal window, I'm going to come in laterally either side of the nuchal ligament and open the window laterally. So I'm going to move the erectors, splenius cervicis, all those layers laterally away from the nuchal ligament, just to get a sense of space and increase the proprioceptive filling in of the back of the neck. There's a lot of work that's focused on lengthening the neck, including the stuff we just did. There's very few that work on widening or lateral release away from the midline. So this is really kind of a unique input for the body. This kind of motion again. Any questions from you guys? And I think we have one or two more. Over the edge supine. For that we need our bolster. And Marjorie, why don't you come up and sit on this? I'm going to have you sit on this bolster right where you are, but with this under your sacrum. Yeah, and then come on back onto that. So does that feel central, more or less? Yes. Yeah, something like that. So that's right in the middle. And what that does, it's a squishy bolster. It's not a hard roll, although, I mean, there might be uses for that too. But all that does is it allows me to show her body what exists behind the midline too. So by being able to lower the body past the midline, that is actually helping both increase the flexion in the various joints, but it's also giving her body a sense of the space back there behind her. Okay, so that's not much. I get a sense that we could do a little more with you. Would that be okay to take it farther?
Yeah.
Why don't you come off that bolster now and then come up so that your head's actually at the edge of the table, and I'll support your head. As long as you're okay with that.
So my head will go past.
Yeah,
Is that far enough up?
that's good. Is that good for you?
Yeah.
Okay. So then here, same idea. Just I can lower the head, not extend the neck, but lower the head backwards past the usual midline. And that again helps color in the map of movement possibilities in her body. And then I can actually start to play with fascial connections here into pectoralis fascia, say. So just opens up a new dimension, or a further dimension in terms of the lengthening. We're doing this here at the end of our sequence because we began by opening up the back, and now we're opening up the front in a similar way. Is all this feeling okay, Marjorie?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, contraindications or cautions, of course, would be a whiplash or vertigo, instability, you know.
So would you, if someone had whiplash, just keep them on the table?
The
with
bolster version.
bolster?
Yeah, do the bolster version. Do the mini version. This is the more extreme version.
What in the case of cold whiplash where it's...
This is great.
then this would be fine.
As long as, you know, someone's comfortable, able to relax into your hands, doesn't show signs of being anxious or any of that, you know, this is fine.
It's yummy.
Would you have them do active movement, or is it mostly passive?
I do it as a passive, but you could probably figure out an active variation. What if you lift up your own head toward the ceiling? And then,
Straight up
yeah,
like
and
that?
then lower it.
What if she nodded while you passively moved the unit?
Let's try that too. Nod, yeah.
Like this?
Yeah,
As you lift
as
up.
I lift and lower, yeah. So, yeah, can you nod back here? That's cool. What's that like for you?
I feel it really right around this
The
area.
highlands.
Too much?
Yeah. No, but
Uncomfortable?
it's
Okay,
just,
great.
it makes me really aware of that
Yeah.
area.
Let the movement stay at your neck joints. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So use those joints that we found. That's beautiful. Great, and then we'll bring it up here. Okay, so this opens up all kinds of possibilities for your other work that you do and know too. So for the pelvic lift, I'm going to have her lift her hips. I'll put my hand right under the sacrum. And I'm going to do a more direct version where it's just direct mechanical traction. And this is essentially the other end of the neck. So we've gotten the two ends now. And then we'll combine that with a little bit of active movement. So if it's okay with you, why don't you go ahead and lift up your hips and come on down. Does that feel like it's more or less in the middle? And it's okay for you?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to do some direct mechanical traction, just lengthening the spine at the lower end of it. And then why don't you play with a little bit of nodding up at that end? Yeah. So do you feel that movement down here? You feel that pulling on me?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so when you look down, it's very clear, that connection right into what I have here, right into your sacrum. So you can play with that, Marjorie, and you can feel where in your neck you can find more motion, how to leave your head heavy and relaxed on the table, while you really just map out this connection for your body. You're letting your body register that connection, that sensation of the way that your neck is actually connected to your sacrum, all the way down here. So we were just broadening out the proprioceptive map. We're just taking it out into a bigger relationship.
Yeah, blend support, because my whole body then feels connected from head to pelvis.
Connecting the big picture too. So go ahead and just take an easy breath, and you just rest as I come out. You stay heavy there, and I just come out long. Okay? Now we were going to do one other thing, weren't we, based on your question? We were going to play with it once you're sitting up. We're going to go back and review it. So take your time, take your time sitting up. What if you just take a moment and, you doing okay? Okay, take a moment and try that nodding.
And so you want me just to nod?
Just nod.
Okay.
Don't worry about doing anything in particular. Yeah, just,
The right
yeah. Just feel what you do before you try to do the right thing. What do you notice if you just do that?
When we first began, I couldn't feel my nod all the way down. Like now I can feel it all the way down to my pelvis.
Awesome.
And then my right side feels like it's participating more now. I think I was
There was
held there. There was
okay.
this movement on that side.
Great. And then, so that's great big picture awareness. So then if we get really small picture, and I'm just touching the back of your neck here at some of those places where there's less movement, what if you, make it even smaller. So is this a place where you can feel movement? Is that clear to
Yes.
you?
Whereas before, it was all held, it was like a block, and then came down from
All right.
bottom. So now I feel like I can.
Okay, so if this was a restaurant, this is what you would put in the doggy bag for later, the takeout.
It gives me
place.
more of a feeling of vertebra by vertebra, whereas before it was more of a hinge, a
Yeah.
full block.
And for the camera, I was just touching those places in the neck that were harder to move before, and she was finding very specific movement there. Most of us would need more time and more cueing. I might even go back and slow that down again and give a couple of cues for you, but you got it right away. And then that's yours to take and play with. Okay. Great. So the little sequence we just did, the techniques we did, a review for you. We started with the nod test to see how people were moving. We did the over the edge technique to take the work down the back, make it big picture. We worked really specifically with the posterior neck in the transversal spinalis technique. We did the posterior cervical technique where we did the wedges and facilitated or talked them through movement, both flexion and extension. Again, that's the one where you spent the most time. The nuchal window, and the over the edge to balance that out. The over the edge supine again is a counterpoint to all of the work we're doing on the back. And the pelvic lift as the cherry on the top. So a couple suggested places to go for more learning. ABMP on their site has the whiplash course, which I've mentioned a couple times already. You can go to their site and review it there, or it's on our site too at this link. A lot of what we've talked about and mentioned applies to whiplash and the other way around, so it's a great companion. And then for the more detailed demonstration, it's on our DVD set, which is for sale at advancedtrainings.com or at this link, a-t.tv/neck video. That will take you to the neck, jaw, and head class on DVD. Thanks to our sponsors, Primal Pictures, who allows us to use their amazing animations and pictures. They give a discount to you now that you've taken our class on their website. And to Handspring, which published these two books, Advanced Myofascial Techniques 1 and 2. Again, the chapter we just did was chapter 12 in volume 2. If you want to download that sample chapter, just go to this website where you can sign up for our e-letter, get the mini manual, and there's links to the videos, but also to the ABMP where you're going to do your quiz and get your CE. And you can get discounts on our store as well as other offers from our sponsors, including Body Cushion, Primal Pictures, Earthlight, etc. Oakworks, let's not forget them as well. Thanks to Ann Williams and ABMP and everybody who made this possible.
Thank you so much, Til. For more information about Til's workshops and products, visit his website.
If you're an ABMP member, you won't want to miss out on October 10th, when we will host Eric Dalton in an exclusive member-only online event to help you solve your clients' pain and injury puzzles. You've never seen techniques quite like these or experienced therapeutic outcomes quite so quickly. This work will change your practice and thrill your clients. Set up your computer, set up your massage table, and find a lucky friend to be your practice body, and work right along with Eric as he walks you through, step by step, each unique technique. Ask Eric questions in real time through live online chat and take quizzes for up to 6 hours of certificates of completion for continuing education. Nothing like this has ever been offered in Massage and Bodywork CE, and only ABMP members get it. If you have massage therapy friends, encourage them to join ABMP now to participate in this one-time only event. We'll see ABMP members right back here with Eric Dalton on October 10th.